Action! Haven't had that in a while. Welcome, Lerato.
Thank you. Yeah.
You know, it's we've been trying to get this done for quite a while now, and I am so happy to have you here. I'm so happy for us to have this opportunity for this talk, because I think it's been long overdue. So welcome.
Thank you.
I also owe you a lot of credence because you have been the most magnanimous supporter of what I do, particularly from a value-add point of view. So I owe you a debt of gratitude that I will always be in for the rest of my life, because if it wasn't for a lot of your input, the impetus of getting to where we are today and where we'll get to in the next 3 or 4 years, would definitely not have been there. So you've certainly been the fuel in the engine.
No, you're absolutely welcome. We wouldn't be here were your products not so compelling.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and we're going to talk about that. I mean, you know, one of the reasons that we're getting together and having a chat, you and I share an amazing passion for young people, for the youth. We share a lot of commonality in terms of our views of what's possible, particularly in this country. Tell us a little bit about you, but as you do that, fill us in a little bit also around this, drive that you have to develop our future and our students.
Okay, so talking about myself, I mean, that's such a broad topic. I've got so many different things that I do.
I know.
So there's me, the entrepreneur. I run a little business in the construction industry, which for me is quite exciting in terms of the job opportunities that it provides and will continue to provide. So that's the one aspect. On the other hand, I sit on a couple of boards, which I also enjoy immensely, particularly NGO boards. But I also sit on the board of Fed Group, which is a financial services business.
Yeah.
But through the board participation, I also have another channel of meaningful engagement with the world that I live in.
Yeah.
And then Thuto Trust, together with Thuto Development Trust. Those are two public benefit organizations which I chair, doing similar work, but to different target audiences.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely between those two, that's a big aspect of how I spend my time. And then lastly, and most significantly, is me.
Yes. Yeah.
as a, I'll call myself a family member, because I'm managing a whole range of different family members from my mother, my husband, my children, and our home.
Yeah.
So that combination of stuff keeps me well occupied in a way which I find very fulfilling.
And you've said something there that, well, you've said a couple of things, but the one I want to touch on is this ability to have a multiplicity of things that you're doing. I mean, that really is the way before. I mean, it's not like the old days where it was an 8 to 5 and Lerato went to one place and one place only, finished at 5 and that was it, and then it was family, and that's how do you juggle that? How do you keep all those in the air, all those balls in the air? Particularly the family one, because that one can easily be dropped every once in a while.
Well, there's that, and you know, it's interesting you ask. A friend of mine was asking me, because recently I also took on a position in terms of the women's ministries in our church.
Oh wow! Okay.
So you know, that's yet another big responsibility.
Yeah.
So he was asking me, how do I juggle it? And I think it's a lot of the time I try to create synergies in terms of all the things that I do with the same set of people.
I like that.
So I mean, I don't leave my business behind when I'm sitting on the board.
Yeah.
You know, I network for all the various stakeholder bases that I have behind me, wherever I go. So that's how I make it work. In terms of my family, I mean, I have a great life. I'm able to spend a lot of time with my children. And COVID has made that even better. We work from home. Well, they're back at school now, but in the afternoons I'm at home. The ability to have meetings, through various apps, etc., means you're more present in terms of your home life, and also a lot more efficient in terms of your work. So that's how I do it. I network wherever I go for multiple purposes.
I remember T.D. Jakes was asked the question once and asked, you're a pastor, you do DVDs, you do CDs, you do movies, you write books. I mean, how do you manage it all? And he actually said exactly what you said. He said, I don't see them all as separate things. I actually see them as one thing. I'm not going from one thing to the next. The one actually leads me to the next thing. That leads me, my pastoring leads me to do the CDs. The CDs lead me to do the book leads me to do the movie, so it's all a secular thing. So it's fantastic that you see it that way. And I think one of the things that I want to touch on, which is, I know a passion of yours, is this element that you're doing with Thuto Trust. And in the youth. Tell us a little bit more about, what you do at Thuto Trust, because I know it's my little play area too, and I it's really given me the belief that the young crop of people that we're developing really do have a potential to lead me and you to our rocking chairs, because in a while there's not much we're going to be doing other than dribbling and pulling out our false teeth. They're gonna Tell me about your passion. Tell me about what you do.
So I grew up in Lesotho,
yeah,
and I grew up in a family in which education was an absolute necessity in life. It was part of our DNA. So we were brought up. I remember we used to talk about boyfriends and husbands and what have you, and the qualifier was always around education. So you could come from a wealthy family owning businesses all over the place, but if you didn't have an education, from my family's perspective, no, you didn't cut it. So education for us, for me, has always been something which is an absolute definer in terms of your success in life.
Yeah.
So that's where I started off with Thuto Trust. And, it's also interesting because increasingly young people are not finishing high school. I mean, for me, that was...
That's a no-no.
Absolute no-no.
It wasn't even,
Yeah, so education was just so important. And within education was also a healthy respect for authority. So you respected your teachers, and your willingness to or your desire to succeed was always linked to having a set of rules, being part of a society, being compliant, being a sociable person. So for me, that was the construct. And when I started off with Thuto Trust, that message for me was the key resonator in terms of why I was there in the first place.
Yeah.
Education as a necessary passage of life, but also as an enabler in terms of future opportunities.
Yeah.
So for young people in particular, and I almost had a parenting kind of outlook towards the young people that we deal with.
Yeah.
It really was about enabling that passage into adulthood, equipped with a proper toolbox of things that could open up opportunities for you, but also facilitate your maturity into becoming a good citizen.
And you place a lot of emphasis there on this construct of the kind of educators and the role that they played. I mean, I remember back then our teachers were our parents, they were our guiders. It wasn't just purely a textbook thing. So, and you talked about rules. I mean, rules are interesting because, when a teacher walked into a classroom, or actually when anybody from a higher grade walked into a classroom, you stood up. teachers were always Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so. There was an etiquette and a discipline that was enshrined in the students, but yet at the same time there was a discipline and an etiquette enshrined in the teachers themselves. We were sending pictures of our school days, and I looked fondly at our principal. Our principal, I can't remember how many we were in school, but he knew everybody's name. Everybody. As he walked past, Rankin, da-da-da, da-da-da. I was like, geez, I remember that, and I'll never forget that. Your concern, your passion for education, massive. Your passion for teachers specifically in that education framework, in developing young people to become the kind of teachers that we need in this country. Tell me a little bit more about it.
Well, teachers are obviously a key component of how education is delivered. And the spirit of it, of teaching, is about that individual having passion for the well-being of the people that they're teaching. So to have a shortage of teachers and to also have behavior around teaching which is counterproductive in terms of the role modeling that goes with it. That for me was a big concern. Yeah. So we wanted to develop quality teachers, and quality is it's a broad spectrum. It's around the competence in terms of subject matter competence. So, I mean, if you're going to teach maths, then you really ought to know maths. But it's also around the emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Because, you are, whether you like it or not, you're playing a parenting role. Yeah. And so you need to have the intuition to be able to deal competently with the issues that young people work with.
You use remarkable words, EQ, intuition, and passion, and obviously the subject matter knowledge. And you have a process in terms of how you acquire that for your interns. I mean, tell me, I know you're very specific about this. You and I have gone into lots of discussions about the quality of teacher, because, Vic, you may be called to do something. You may really feel you're a great, singer, but Vic, you're not really a great singer, right? So let's just start there. So tell me a little bit more about your process and how you sort of derive these students, and then they go into your program.
What we do at Thuto Trust is we fund complete bursaries for young people to go and study to become teachers. Yeah. But we've long ago recognized that the academic study, the university qualification, is not sufficient to develop someone into a holistic, teacher. So we pay for the tuition, the typical bursary components, the tuition, the books, the accommodation. But what we started to put more emphasis on was, and this was linked to what we are trying to do, it's about teachers being recognized as role models within society. And so that expectation moves away from just the teacher in the classroom. It's about how the teacher manages themselves and others. So if you can't manage yourself, then how can you? I mean, teaching is essentially a leadership position.
I was coming there, but carry on. Absolutely.
So you're leading in the classroom. Yeah. You're leading hopefully out of the classroom. So you're not going to have your students finding you drunk as anything at a tavern next door, or not showing up at all. So it's about you first, leading yourself, being able to develop yourself, being able to move to a higher level where you are able to inspire others. If you can't inspire others, I can't see how you stand in front of a classroom and influence young minds, whether in terms of your subject or more broadly. So in terms of our requirements, we are quite stringent in terms of recruiting people who have got some level of leadership capability in the first place.
Yeah.
And there we, typically we would be funding young people at undergrad level or at postgrad level.
Yeah.
So if you look at it at undergrad level, we're recruiting young people who have demonstrated leadership at home, leadership within their schools. And there's loads of superb young people out there who have done things like set up study groups for their grades, out of their own initiation. They've initiated study groups, they help others, they lead others to be able to be successful in their matric results. So it's that kind of experience that we look for, because we ourselves have limited resources and capabilities. So we can't work with a complete absence of anything looking like leadership. So we look for our recruits to meet us halfway. So they need to have some demonstrated abilities in leading. I mean, we've had wonderful people, for example, leading their siblings in their family and families of single mothers, etc. And all that they've been able to achieve at that level. So that's what we're looking for, and that's the opportunity which we then present for those young people to further harness their abilities, to develop their abilities, to become great leaders.
And I think what I really like about what you do, and what I think is unique about what you do, is that your philosophy in terms of the leadership element, and I liked the element of leaders, teachers now becoming leaders, because it's the opening ambit when we discuss and have a conversation to say it is no longer about the dissemination of information. Information is readily available. I mean, we had this conversation earlier on. Why are we going to learn what the capital of Bulgaria is? Because I can just Google that, right? There are certain things that are not going to be the requirements of teachers anymore, because we can actually go and access that information. So what do teachers do? They have to lead and inspire. They have to give the sense to young people that the possibilities are there. They have to, what I call, enable their minds to be opened to possibilities. So one thing I really enjoy about your philosophy in your organization and your leadership of that is that succinctness of trying to say, let us elevate the quality of what we're trying to distribute, as opposed to let us quantify what we do, because sometimes it's just about numbers. If I've got 1,000 or 100,000 of these that's going on, we give the thumbs up. But you're looking for something a little bit more specific, because I think you believe and you know that specificness has an ability to magnify itself significantly more than just generalizing. So, just coming back to the process, you were giving some examples about some young people that you've got. Tell us about how the program has been going, and then I want to talk about this resourcing capability, because I brought you here very specifically, and I've said, Lerato, we need to have this conversation because South Africa as a whole has to understand the kind of program that you're running very specifically, and the kind of intentions that you're putting towards it, and what is required, because I think everybody needs to play a part here. It's not just you who's going to be able to succeed.
I should mention that my personal journey has been a shift from the emphasis on the degree to rather looking at psychosocial support. So we have young people, as I mentioned, all of them have to be registered for studies at at a tertiary institution. But as you say, you can always go on the internet and teach yourself whatever you teach yourself. But the emphasis on psychosocial support and the need to bring along your degree in the process, it's all around those emotional intelligence skills that we're trying to develop. Yeah. So we require our beneficiaries, for example, to achieve a minimum of 60% in terms of their degree. For me, it's not so much the 60%. It's about the self-discipline, the meeting your end of a commitment, your planning your life and managing yourself to be able to meet that commitment. So there's a lot of life skill that goes into being successful in terms of your university studies.
Yeah.
And that's why, it's an important success factor for us. But on top of that, the young people that we deal with come from very, very dysfunctional environments. And really a lot of them are so impressive because the tenacity that they have to have in order to be successful despite their circumstances, it's huge. We've got, particularly you'll see at the postgraduate level, young people who finish their degrees at VIDS or whatever, and they're commuting from Cosmo City, for example, with minimal funding. Many of them would have had maybe tuition and that's it. But you can just imagine university studies when you are living next door to a tavern, you don't have electricity, there's no Wi-Fi, no nothing. So for someone to be able to be successful coming from that kind of environment is superb. So we try to, as I say, meet people halfway. After making an effort like that, we really want to reward you with even more of an opportunity. So we partner with a lot of schools, private schools and public schools, and we offer those, our beneficiaries the opportunity to be in those schools, to be in a professional environment, which is very exacting in terms of standards. Because we emphasize the practical learning more than the academic learning. So that practical learning is so we've got 4 pillars. It's the university studies, it is the internship. So each of our beneficiaries is an intern in a school that is one of our partner schools. And those partner schools have been selected by virtue of their quality. So we don't want to set anybody up for failure by putting them in a dysfunctional environment.
Yeah.
We put them in places where they can learn from top teachers. And private versus public, we try to straddle the two because we believe in both environments. There's excellent learning opportunities for our interns. Yeah. The one is a very well-resourced environment, which is great. But on the other hand, being more entrepreneurial or lateral in your thinking, being able to achieve results without the resources. That's what a lot of public schools have been able to do. Achieve excellent results despite limited resources. So we try to teach our interns both of those. The third component, which I mentioned, is on the psychosocial support, which really is very important because, as I said, they're coming from very, very dysfunctional environments, limited parenting guidance, and I believe the ages between 18 and 25 are quite quite tricky.
You're taking me back.
They're quite tricky. They're transitional years in which you try to consolidate yourself as an adult. So it's that transition from being a child to being an adult. So the psychosocial support gears you towards being able to be successful as an adult. But not only successful for your own benefit, successful in terms of you being a teacher, because your behavior very much influences young learners who are looking up to you. So the role model aspect of what teachers are, whether they like it or not, we take very seriously. And then the last component is on leadership. So leadership development is obviously key. I mean, I can't see how you can be a teacher and be an incapable leader. So all those 4 go into our package. We've had a lot of successes. I mean, and if we're still figuring out how exactly to measure success. We look at matric results, for example, not matric results, but your annual results at university. Our interns get distinctions inevitably. Distinctions every year because of the kind of support that we give them. But the other measure of success is obviously the completion of the program and going on to become a teacher.
So you were telling us about the psychosocial program. I think let's carry on with the psychosocial element of it. Obviously, it's an interest of mine too, but I'd like to hear more about what you wanted to say about the psychosocial.
So the reason we started with it in the first place is, I mean, if you look at the failure rate in universities, how many young people starting in first year end up dropping out. I mean, it's huge. It's a huge waste of funds.
42%.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. So we started with psychosocial support in order to provide better support during the course of our young people's university studies. Because a lot of the time, the issues that they face have nothing to do with their academic studies. These are life issues. So we wanted to give them better support to enable them to be more successful. That has transitioned a bit because the environment that we deal with has become a lot more difficult for teachers. So a lot of teachers now are facing dysfunctional children in their classrooms and are extremely ill-equipped to deal with it. So our focus in terms of psychosocial support has now included not only the individual who is studying, but also facilitating and enabling them to learn how to provide psychosocial support to young learners that they may be dealing with. And we think that's quite an essential component of being a teacher in South Africa.
And one of the reasons that, as I said earlier, is we're having this conversation is because I don't think I've come across a holistic solutioning to the development of teachers in our country like you have, like your organization has. There's a leadership component here that resides within you, and a certain sense of foresight around developing not just the quantum of teachers, but the quality of teachers. And I think in a lot of our education, we've been measuring quantum. We talk about how many people pass or fail, but we don't really talk about the quality of that pass and fail. We talk about how many people go through school, but we don't talk about the quality of that schooling. And I think you're bringing a significantly fresh and significantly required look at how we do this. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it's my appeal to organizations to take a very closer look at you in terms of consideration for support. So when it comes to financial support, growing this, because you've been scaling over the last few years, and I know you want to scale more, but you still want to retain that element of quality that you put in. What is the kind of resourcing requirements that the organization needs in order to sort of ramp up to where there's some numbers that are coming out of this that really add some impact into our environment?
I think in the last couple of years, much as scale is right up there in terms of our objectives, the quality aspect is a continuous improvement project for us. So a lot of our resources have been going into growing the package of what we provide to our young beneficiaries. If you look at it, we've been doing this for the last 5 years or so. But where we started versus where we are now, I mean, there's been a huge development, and partly, obviously, through your involvement. That's been quite significant as well. The emphasis on the psychosocial support has necessarily had to improve because our context demands it. So that's where we've been. We've been investing a lot in terms of developing the program, building it, making sure you testing it, obviously, and getting the results. So the limitation that we have is purely financial. We are spending at the moment about 160,000 per annum per student.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at it,
and that's tuition, the holistic, what you explained at the beginning. That's everything from the tuition to the accommodation to the food to the transportation,
mentoring, coaching,
to the psychosocial, to the coaching, to the leadership. That's the whole ambit.
Yes, absolutely. So 160,000 per annum per student. The tuition, if you look at tuition alone, tuition at VITS, at UJ, etc., is, for undergrad, you'll find it's probably around 30,000.
All right.
So a lot of what we do, I mean, accommodation is quite expensive. Accommodation can typically come to about 60,000. But it's all the add-on stuff that brings it up to 160,000. And we think it's definitely an investment which is worthwhile.
Yeah.
As I said, many of these young people to come into our program with inadequate parental guidance. And this supplements who they are, enabling them to develop, to be in a position where really they are credible adults who can stand in front of young learners and play the role for them. So, it's really, really an important investment for us on a societal level.
Yeah.
I mean, there's too many young learners. We talk about the whole GBV topic, for example.
Yeah.
And, I'm that contrarian person who's always looking at it from a female point of view.
Yeah.
A lot of GBV at its root is inadequate parenting.
Yep.
So
it's amazing you say that. We have men of value, and Craig Wilkinson, who specializes in masculinity, he's got an NPO called Fathering a Nation, and he wrote the book Dad. Talked about the true understanding of the significance of the absence of parenting from fathers to young boys and young men in the long term. And you're right, and I'm glad you said that, because I know it's a very sensitive and difficult subject and topic to be raised, but you're bringing teachers into an environment where, to your point, if they don't have the prerequisite leadership skills, and leadership is a skill, it's not, you don't acquire it from having breakfast. You actually have to learn what the other ingredients that go into it. If you don't acquire that through your childhood, in terms of seeing it and understanding what it is to be a man, what it is to be a father, the fact that protection is a responsibility of, the fact that serving is a responsibility of yours, the fact that loving is a responsibility of yours, you then get, you lose these constructs. So I carry on. I mean, I interrupted. I want to know more about the costing structure and the kind of elements that you're looking for.
Yeah, so at Thuto Trust, we have a portfolio of investments, and the yield from those investments makes it possible to partially fund our interns, our students. But there's no doubt, we do not have sufficient resources to carry this on our own. We have a big fundraising drive where we try to reach corporates. We're trying to do a lot more on the crowdfunding side to be able to reach individuals. But essentially, we look for co-funding possibilities, where we partner with whoever who would like to fund whatever. It could be as small as just funding the books. We normally spend about $3,500 per annum on books. To funding higher ticket items like the tuition or the accommodation or the psychosocial support.
And this is where individuals can come in. Individuals can support you. I want to emphasize the individuals who, if you feel that 3,000 rands, if can support one student, support that, do that. Don't feel it's too little, because 10, 15, 20, 30, 100 people doing 3,000 rands is, 100 people having those books, and to your point, even the 30,000. And if you feel that, yes, my children have all gone. Oh gosh, I can't get into those days. My children have all gone, and I've paid all the school fees, but I still am able to pay one or two elements with regards to tuition. Jump in and support a student. So I encourage that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a spectrum of different stakeholders that we engage with in order to co-fund this investment. And really, I think it's a societal responsibility. It's, unfortunately, the opportunity that we are faced with is around BEE, for example, where for skills development, you'll get, reward for funding a bursary of a university student. But I think that's a myopic view in terms of why it's important to do this. When you think about the impact on every single child every single adult at some point in their lives has been through a teacher. And that experience can really shape an individual into something superb or not.
I've had both. So, and just a touch on that story I dreamt of him last night. Can you believe it? Maybe it was because of this. Mr. Day, I'm not even sure if he's still alive. Mr. Day said to me at school, and I was about to write my O-levels, he said, Rankin, if anybody ever offers you a job before you write your exams, take it. And that was his sense of confidence in me. And when I failed my matric, my equivalent to matric, my A-levels, and I had to go and repeat, the teacher that I met when I repeated was the teacher that got me through. Because, I went from failing 2 A-levels to writing 4 I's and passing them all significantly well. So where are we going to get our doctors? I know you pressed for time, but is there anything else that, I can talk on this for ages because there's a couple of things that you said, but is there anything else that you want to amplify and stress around this process that you're going through with regards to growing and acquiring the kind of support? You said something earlier that I just want to also mention. You said you're meeting these students halfway because they've come and put so much effort, so much energy in going through their academia, succeeding to a certain point, trying to develop themselves by supporting students or whatever the case may be in some kind of leadership capacity, living in conditions that really are not conducive to success. You come along and help. How can others help you who are helping others so that you can help them?
So I think the main way, which we mentioned, is financial. Really, the only reason why we are not scaling this up a lot more is because we don't have the funds to be able to do so. So one way definitely is through contributing. We've got a website. You can contact us in terms of anything that you're willing to contribute financially.
That's tutotrust.org. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And on our website there is a page where you can actually do donations.
Right. On an individual basis.
Yes. On a corporate basis, it's the same story. And we really place a lot of emphasis on good governance. We do this for several reasons, but one reason is we believe we can achieve a higher return on investment in terms of what is spent on studies. And we do so through giving the requisite support to people who are studying to enable them to be successful and to go on into their careers successfully. So the return on investment is a key aspect of how we measure our success. But the other way to contribute, which is how organizations such as yours do, is through the interaction with our young people to enable different skills in terms of life skills. So we've spoken about the leadership development side of things. But I think role modeling is so important. I know in many of the sessions that they've had with you, seeing other leaders, other people in leadership positions, hearing of those stories is quite an inspiration to young people who are still working their way through a vision for their future. So that kind of influence, I think, is quite important. I was influenced by role models, helping me to understand possibilities.
Yeah.
So that's another aspect. But certainly, I think in terms of furthering our cause, it's the finances that really limit what we can do, and it's not a huge investment necessarily that's required, particularly if we look at it from a co-funding, a partnering type of model, where we're not going to any one person necessarily to foot the entire bill. We're also coming to the party with a component of it. Yeah. So, we're constantly creating new partnerships. Like we've recently signed a new contract with the Department of Basic Education, where they are funding bursaries for tuition, accommodation, and books, and we are coming in to fund the rest. And all of this is in order for these young people to be on our program. So the DBE has been very, very impressed with the kind of results that we get.
Yep.
And, the results specifically in terms of getting a good return on your investment.
Well, I've seen the students that start in year one, particularly in the undergraduate B.Ed phase of their studies. And when they go through the entire program up until year 4 and come out of there, what kind of human beings you've created from the time they started and to the time they ended. And this is not, as I say, and as you've said, purely just a pure academic consequence. It's all the elements that you've added together that enable them to go out and really have the confidence and the belief in order to do what they do. The other reason why I think society has to, and when you said this is a societal challenge, the other reason is the future of education is changing. And it's changing dramatically. You're not training a teacher to sit in one classroom to talk to 30 students. These teachers can talk to hundreds of thousands of students simultaneously with the technology of the future. So the heightened levels of their capability and their awareness to be able to deliver that is going to be more significant than just training that one student who's going to walk into one school and talk to the 30 kids that are in front of him. That's how we can amplify quantumly our educational distribution in this country for everybody to become a learner, as opposed to just a few who only get the privilege to meet the right teacher or the good teacher.
And I'll give you an example of the kind of work that we try to do. I remember sitting in a panel and we were interviewing for 10 new bursaries. And 9 out of 10 of the people that we interviewed had children. None of them were married. They had at least a child, if not 2, 3 children. And when you ask them, so all of these had recently matriculated, and when you ask them, where are your children? No, my grandmother, my mother, the responsibility wasn't there. And, so that's incongruous with what you expect.
I'm about to do,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So part of what we do in a 4-year period is to create a better link between goals and behavior and choices. And, all of that really applies to anybody. But I think particularly somebody who's wanting to stand in front of a classroom and is influential to young learners. I think it's absolutely important to have the right caliber of character in front of young children. So yes, you can be the best person in maths, but if on a social behavioral point of view, your behavior is not a good influence to young learners, then I think you're not the right person to be in front of a classroom.
I completely agree. I concur, and I know you're pressed for time, and I want to say, Lerato, that your vision in terms of what you're doing, your influence, when you talk about influence, your influence in terms of how you have taken this journey is monumental. And I come across and meet a lot of people and have a lot of conversations. And I really do believe that it's a societal challenge now. If we don't get this right, tomorrow the matric results are coming out for the I think it's the private schools. Next week the public schools, the matric results come out. We are growing in a societal issue that, if not curbed, is not going to be. The predictions are almost inevitable. So I thank you for that. I thank you for your role, and I'm amazed at all the juggling that you do. but you certainly have got this down to a fine tee. And thank you for coming through and thank you for saying this. And by the way, we're not ending this conversation. This is just part one.
But I also want to thank you, obviously. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Nice.
But I want to say also that this notion that I have to go and make a whole load of money before I'm in a position to help someone else is simply false. There's ways and means, as I'm doing, to juggle it all along the same journey. There's no better time than now. And if we don't do it, here we are, we're sitting with issues of crime, gender-based violence, a depleted human capital resource in our country, because we're not paying adequate attention to what we need to be doing in terms of a holistic educational experience for our young people.
I couldn't have said it better, and those powerful words. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh, for managing the process. And we'll carry this on for sure. More conversations to be.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.